Privacy is a currency in this house, and Emily just spent it all. At 20, she thought she was too old for consequences. But when she digitally stalks her grieving mother, she learns that some lines once crossed lead to a reckoning that words alone cannot fix. Asterisk. The rain in Brighton doesn't wash things clean. It just presses the grime deeper into the pavement. It was a relentless, rhythmic drumming against the window pane of Emily's second-floor bedroom, sounding like 1,000 impatient fingers tapping, demanding to be let in. But nothing was getting into this room. The air here was stale, recycled, heavy with the scent of old vanilla candles and the sharp, metallic tang of anxiety. Emily sat cross-legged in the center of her double bed, a fortress of pillows arranged behind her, though they offered little comfort. She was 20 years old. It was an age that felt like a cruel joke, technically an adult, legally free, yet functionally paralyzed. She was suspended in that suffocating amber between adolescence and true independence, stuck in her childhood home, sleeping in a room painted a shade of lavender she had chosen when she was 12. Her eyes were locked on her phone screen. The device was her lifeline, her weapon, and tonight, her curse. The artificial light cast an eerie, sickly neon green hue across her face, highlighting the dark circles under her eyes and the tightness of her jaw. The light matched the faded t-shirt she had worn for 3 days straight. It was a neon green garment, once vibrant, now pilled and soft with age, bearing the screen-printed slogan, "I'm not lost, I'm exploring." The irony wasn't lost on her. She wasn't exploring. She was hunting. Downstairs, the house groaned. It was a settling sound, the timber contracting in the cooling evening air. But to Emily, every creak sounded like a footstep. Her father had been gone for 2 years now. A massive heart attack, the kind doctors call a widowmaker, quiet and cool and absolute. He had collapsed in the garden while pruning the hydrangeas. One minute he was trimming dead heads, the next he was a memory dot since that afternoon. The house had changed. It wasn't just quieter. The silence had texture. It was thick, woolen, suffocating. And her mother, Sarah, had become a ghost within it. Sarah didn't wail. She didn't throw herself on the casket. At the funeral, she had stood with a spine of steel, wiping her eyes with a single tissue before putting on oversized sunglasses and telling well-wishers, "He's in a better place." Then she turned away. That was Sarah, efficient with her emotions, compartmentalized, but lately, the ghost had started disappearing for real. It started 3 weeks ago. Thursday nights. Sarah would leave the house at exactly 6:17 p.m. She wouldn't say where she was going. She wouldn't ask Emily if she needed anything. She would just put on her navy wool coat, the one that smelled of expensive dry cleaning and detachment, grab her car keys, and walk out the door. "I'll be back," she would say. Not "I'm going to the movies" or "I'm meeting Janet." Just "I'll be back." Tonight was the fourth Thursday. Emily's single quotes, thumb hovered over the screen. The app was called GeoFind. It was innocent enough in its branding, a bright blue icon with a smiling satellite, marketed to parents who wanted to make sure their kids got to school safely. But Emily wasn't a parent, and Sarah wasn't a child. 1 week ago, in a moment of desperate, frantic curiosity, Emily had taken her mother's phone while Sarah was in the shower. It had taken 30 seconds. Unlock code, 1985, the year her parents got married. Download app. Accept permissions. Hide icon deep in a folder of utility apps. It was a violation. Emily knew this. Her stomach churned with a mixture of guilt and adrenaline every time she opened the interface. But the silence in the house had driven her to it. The way Sarah looked through her, not at her. The way Sarah moved through the kitchen like a stranger in her own skin. Managing Emily like she was just another household logistical issue like the laundry, or the bills, or the cat that refused to eat the cheap kibble. Emily needed to know. Was it a man? Was she gambling? Was she sick? On the screen, the little red dot representing Sarah's phone was moving. Emily watched, her breath shallow. The dot slid down Elm Street, paused at the traffic light on Kings Road, and then turned left toward the old industrial district. This was the routine. Where are you going? Emily whispered to the empty room. Her voice sounded raspy, unused. The dot stopped. It wasn't a restaurant. It wasn't a bar. It wasn't the cinema. Emily zoomed in on the map. The pin had dropped on a narrow side street called Willow Lane. There was nothing there except old warehouses converted into vague office spaces. Emily had Googled it last week. The address corresponded to a nondescript building listed only as the Willow Room. No website, no reviews, just a phone number that went straight to a generic voicemail. The mystery was eating Emily alive. It wasn't just curiosity. It was the feeling of abandonment. If Sarah was starting a new life, why wasn't Emily part of it? If Sarah was in trouble, why wouldn't she let Emily help? The silence was a wall, and tonight, Emily was going to smash through it. She tossed the phone onto the duvet and scrambled off the bed. She grabbed her sneakers, beat-up Converse that had seen better days, and shoved her feet into them without untying the laces. She grabbed a dark gray hoodie from the floor, smelling faintly of fabric softener and neglect, and pulled it on over her neon green t-shirt. She checked the mirror. She looked 20 going on 12. Wide eyes, pale skin, a posture that screamed defensive. She pulled the hood up. "I'm not lost," she muttered, quoting her shirt. "I'm investigating." She slipped out of her room and down the stairs. The house was dark, shadows stretching long and distorted across the hallway floor. The grandfather clock in the foyer ticked loudly, a metronome counting down to something terrible. Emily grabbed her own car keys, her dad's old Ford Fiesta that she had inherited, and slipped out the back door. The rain hit her instantly, cold and biting. It soaked into her jeans within seconds, but the physical discomfort was grounding. It made the mission feel real. She drove without radio, the windshield wipers struggling against the brightened downpour. She knew the route. She had memorized it from the tracking app. 20 minutes later, she parked 2 blocks away from Willow Lane. She killed the engine and sat in the dark for a moment, listening to the rain hammer the roof. Her heart was hammering harder. This was crazy. This was stalking. This was the kind of thing that broke relationships irrevocably, but the alternative, living in the dark, living with a mother who was physically present but emotionally absent, felt worse. Emily opened the car door and stepped out. She kept to the shadows, walking briskly, head down. The street was deserted. The streetlights flickered weakly, casting pools of amber light that reflected off the oil slicked tarmac. She turned the corner onto Willow Lane. There it was, the building from the map. It was a quiet, unassuming brick structure squeezed between a shuttered print shop and a vacant lot. There was no neon sign, no welcoming window display. Just a heavy wooden door with a single brass bell above it, parked directly in front, was her mother's Volvo. Emily felt a surge of vindication mixed with nausea. She was here. Sarah was here. But what was here? Emily scanned the street. A white delivery van was parked across the road, providing the perfect cover. She dashed across the wet asphalt and crouched behind the van's rear bumper. From here, she had a direct line of sight to the door of the Willow Room. She checked her phone. 7:12 p.m. Sarah had been inside for nearly an hour. Emily waited. The rain seeped through her hoodie, plastering her neon shirt to her skin. She shivered, wrapping her arms around herself. The cold was seeping into her bones, but she couldn't leave. She was the detective in her own life story, waiting for the clue that would make everything make sense. She imagined scenarios. Maybe it was a secret gambling den. Maybe it was a cult. Maybe Sarah was seeing a man, some slick, silver-haired businessman who wanted her to sell the house and move to Spain. The thought made Emily's teeth clench. 7:30 p.m. past 8 o'clock p. At 8:45 p.m., the door opened. Emily flinched, ducking lower behind the van. She peeked around the tire, her breath catching in her throat. Sarah stepped out. Asterisk, she was wearing her navy coat, buttoned to the chin. But her posture, it was different. Usually, Sarah stood like a soldier, shoulders back, chin up, defying the world to hurt her. Now she looked slumped, heavy, and she wasn't alone. An older woman stood in the doorway, holding the door open. She touched Sarah's arm gently. It was a gesture of such intimacy and care that Emily felt a pang of jealousy so sharp it almost doubled her over. Sarah nodded, saying something Emily couldn't hear, and then turned to walk toward her car. As Sarah passed under the streetlight, Emily saw her face. Her eyes were red and swollen. Her skin was blotchy. Her lips were pressed together in a thin, trembling line. She wasn't wearing her sunglasses. She wasn't hiding. She looked raw, broken. She looked like she had been crying for 2 hours straight. Emily froze. This wasn't a date. This wasn't a cult. Sarah reached her car, fumbled with her keys, and got in. She sat there for a long moment before starting the engine. She didn't check her mirror. She didn't look around. She just drove away, slowly, navigating the rain with a terrifying lack of focus. Emily remained crouched behind the van long after the taillights had disappeared. The realization washed over her, colder than the rain. Therapy, grief support. Her mother, the woman who never cried, the woman who treated emotions like hazardous waste, was going to a secret place to fall apart so she wouldn't have to do it in front of Emily. The betrayal wasn't in the secrecy. Emily realized as she walked back to her own car. The betrayal was in the silence. It was the assumption that Emily couldn't handle it. Or worse, the assumption that Emily was just another burden to be managed. Shielded from the messy reality of their shared loss, Emily drove home in a daze. She beat Sarah back by 10 minutes, sprinting up the stairs to her room, stripping off her wet clothes, and diving into bed just as the front door opened downstairs. She lay there in the dark, listening to Sarah move around the kitchen, the kettle whistling, the fridge opening, the silence returning. Emily didn't sleep that night. She lay awake, the image of her mother's tear-streaked face burned into her retinas. And with it, a growing, bubbling anger. Why didn't you tell me? Why do I have to find out like this? Why am I not enough for you to trust? The morning light was gray and unforgiving. It filtered through the blinds, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the stagnant air of Emily's room. She got up, her body aching from the cold dampness of the stack-out. She pulled on a fresh pair of jeans, ripped at the knees, naturally, and grabbed the neon green t-shirt from the floor. It was dry now, though wrinkled. She put it back on. It was her armor. She grabbed her phone. The tracking app was still open in the background. She closed it, a spike of guilt pricking her, but she pushed it down. She needed answers. She marched downstairs. The kitchen smelled of burnt toast and Earl Grey tea. Sarah was standing at the counter, back to the door, staring out at the wet garden. She wore a crisp white blouse and gray slacks, her hair pulled back in its usual severe bun. Bethos was gone. The soldier was back. "Morning," Sarah said, not turning around. Her voice was steady, controlled. Emily stopped at the kitchen table. There was a plate of dry toast sitting there. "Morning," Emily replied. Her voice shook slightly. She pulled out a chair and sat down. The wood scraped loudly against the floor. Sarah didn't flinch. Emily looked at her mother's back. The rigid posture. The denial of pain. It was infuriating. "Where were you last night?" Emily asked. Sarah paused in the middle of stirring her tea. "I had an errand. Work-related." The lie was smooth. Emily felt the anger flare, hot and bright. Work? At 9 p.m.? It ran late, Sarah said, turning around. Her face was composed. The redness was gone, hidden under a layer of foundation. Why are you asking? Because you're never home, Emily snapped. Because we live in the same house, but I feel like I'm living with a hologram. Sarah sighed, a small, impatient sound. Emily, please. Not before coffee. I'm busy. I'm handling things. Handling things, Emily repeated. Like Dad? The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Sarah's eyes narrowed. That is not fair. It's not fair that you lie to me. Emily shouted, the volume startling even herself. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. She unlocked it. Opened the app. I know where you were, Mom. I know about the Willow Room. She slid the phone across the kitchen table. It spun on the smooth wood, coming to a stop right in front of Sarah's mug. The map was bright on the screen. The history log was open, Thursday. Willow Lane, 2 hours, 14 minutes. Sarah stared at the phone. She didn't pick it up. She didn't touch it. She just looked at the glowing screen, the undeniable proof of her daughter's surveillance. For a long minute, the only sound was the hum of the refrigerator. Then Sarah looked up. She really looked at Emily. Her eyes weren't angry, not yet. They were hollow. You tracked me, Sarah said softly. I had to, Emily said, her voice trembling. You wouldn't tell me the truth. I thought you were leaving me, so you violated my privacy? Sarah asked. You treated me like a criminal? You put a digital leash on me? I was worried. You were intrusive, Sarah corrected, her voice gaining an edge of steel. Why didn't you tell me? Emily demanded again. Why go to a grief counselor and lie about it? Because I didn't want you to think you had to fix me. Sarah snapped, the control finally cracking. Because when I look at you, I see him. And sometimes I just need to go somewhere where I can be a widow, not a mother. Where I don't have to be strong for you. The words hung in the air, sharp and cutting. Emily recoiled as if slapped. So you lie instead. I protected you, Sarah said. You shut me out. Emily stood up, grabbing the phone from the table. I didn't mean to steal your privacy, but you forced me to. If you treated me like an adult, I wouldn't have to act like a spy. If you were an adult, Sarah said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, you would have asked. You would have respected my silence. You wouldn't have downloaded spyware onto your mother's phone. I did what I had to do, Emily said. Clutching the phone to her chest, the neon green of her shirt reflecting in the polished granite of the counter. And I'm not sorry, I know. At least now I know you're human. She turned and stormed out of the kitchen. Sarah didn't follow. She stood by the counter, watching the empty doorway. Her hand trembled as she reached for her tea, but the confrontation wasn't over. Emily didn't know it yet, but she had just triggered a mechanism in Sarah that had been dormant for 6 years. Upstairs, Emily slammed her door. She paced the small room, heart racing. She felt vindicated, righteous. She had exposed the lie. She had forced the truth, but 10 minutes later, the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. She replayed the look in Sarah's eyes. It wasn't just shock. It was disappointment. Deep, profound disappointment, and then she heard the footsteps. They weren't the soft, shuffling steps of the ghost mother. They were rhythmic, deliberate, heavy thud, thud, thud. They came up the stairs. They moved down the hallway. Emily froze in the middle of her room. The door handle turned. Sarah walked in. She had removed her blazer. She was just in her blouse and slacks. Her face was scrubbed clean of emotion, a blank mask of maternal authority that Emily hadn't seen since she was 14. In her left hand. She held Emily's neon green t-shirt, the one she had worn yesterday, which had been in the hamper. In her right hand, She held something else. It was dark walnut, about 14 inches long. The handle was worn smooth, the wood possessing a deep, rich patina from years of existence. It was a paddle, an old-school, heavy, solid wood paddle that had lived on the top shelf of the hallway closet for half a decade. Emily's breath hitched. Her eyes widened, fixing on the object. "You're not serious," Emily whispered. Sarah didn't shout. She didn't look crazy. She looked terrifyingly calm. She walked over to Emily's desk and placed the dirty neon shirt on it, folding it with precise, almost military care. Then she placed the paddle on top of the shirt. The sound of the wood clicking against the desk surface was louder than a gunshot in the small room. "You wear this shirt," Sarah said, gesturing to the neon fabric Emily was currently wearing, identical to the one on the desk. "You wear it like a uniform?" "I'm not lost, I'm exploring. You think it makes you look free, rebellious." Sarah turned to face her daughter. "But today it won't protect you." "Mom, I'm 20 years old," Emily said, taking a step back, her hands coming up defensively. "You can't just walk in here with that." Asterisk, "You are living under my roof," Sarah said. "You're eating my food. And you used my phone plan to track my movements like I was a suspect in a murder investigation. You broke the fundamental contract of this house, Emily. Trust." "I told you why." "Motives do not excuse methods." Sarah cut her off. "You lied. You manipulated. You turned love into surveillance. You stole my autonomy because you couldn't handle your own anxiety." Sarah took a step forward. She didn't raise the paddle. She just let it sit there on the desk, a silent promise. "I have been patient," Sarah said softly. "I have been quiet. I have let you drift because I thought you were grieving too. But I see now that my silence has not helped you. It has enabled you to remain a child." She looked Emily up and down, and children who break trust need to be reset. Emily felt a flush of heat rise up her neck. "I am not a child. I won't do it." "Then leave," Sarah said. The words hung there. Simple, brutal. "What?" "Pack a bag," Sarah said, her voice devoid of bluff. "Pack a bag, get in your car, and leave. Go find an apartment. Pay your own bills. Buy your own food. If you are an adult who is pure to me, then you don't need my roof. But if you stay here, if you want to be my daughter, then you will accept the consequences of your actions." Emily stared at her. She had no money. She had a part-time job at a bookstore that barely covered her gas and phone bill. She had nowhere to go. Sarah waited. She knew the math Emily was doing in her head. "I'm counting to 3, Sarah said. You can either walk downstairs to the kitchen or you can pack. 1. Emily's heart hammered against her ribs. This was insane. This was archaic. But as she looked at Sarah, she saw something she hadn't seen in 2 years. She saw presence. Her mother was fully here. Not a ghost. Not a grief-stricken widow. A mother. A force of nature, too. The threat wasn't just about the pain of the paddle. It was about the reality of the world outside. It was about the choice between being a little girl who runs away or a woman who faces the music. "Mom, please," Emily whined, her voice cracking into a childish register she hated. 3. Sarah reached for the door handle. "I'll get you some boxes." "No," Emily blurted out. "No, don't." Sarah stopped. She looked back. "Then make your choice." Emily looked at the paddle on the desk. She looked at her mother. She swallowed hard, the lump in her throat tasting of bile and shame. I'll go downstairs," Emily whispered. Sarah nodded. It was a sharp, single motion. She picked up the paddle from the desk. "Kitchen. 2 minutes. Don't make me come back up here." Sarah turned and walked out, leaving the door open. Emily stood alone in her room. The neon green glow of her t-shirt seemed to dim. She felt small, exposed. She looked at her reflection in the mirror. The defiant girl with the tracking app was gone. In her place was a daughter who had pushed too far and was about to be pulled back. With trembling hands, she smoothed down her shirt, took a deep, shuddering breath, and walked toward the stairs. Asterisk. "No," Emily blurted out. "No, don't." Sarah stopped. She looked back. "Then make your choice." Emily looked at the paddle on the desk. She looked at her mother. She swallowed hard, the lump in her throat tasting of bile and shame. I'll go downstairs," Emily whispered. Sarah nodded. It was a sharp, single motion. She picked up the paddle from the desk. "Kitchen. 2 minutes. Don't make me come back up here." Sarah turned and walked out, leaving the door open. Emily stood alone in her room. The neon green glow of her t-shirt seemed to dim. She felt small, exposed. She looked at her reflection in the mirror. The defiant girl with the tracking app was gone. In her place was a daughter who had pushed too far and was about to be pulled back. With trembling hands, she smoothed down her shirt, took a deep, shuddering breath, and walked toward the stairs. Asterisk, the staircase felt longer than it was. 12 steps. 12 wooden planks covered in beige carpet that Emily had run up and down 1,000 times as a teenager. But today, as a 20-year-old woman, every step felt like a descent into a heavy, suffocating pressure. The house was silent again, but it wasn't the empty silence of before. It was a loaded silence, the kind that exists in the split second after a glass is knocked off a table. But before it hits the floor, Emily reached the bottom of the stairs. Her legs felt heavy, her blood rushing in her ears like white noise. She turned the corner into the kitchen. It was impossibly bright. The morning sun had finally broken through the cloud cover, flooding the room with a harsh, revealing light that made the dust motes dance and the stainless steel appliances gleam. Sarah was standing by the heavy oak dining table. She hadn't moved. The paddle lay on the table surface, dark against the light wood. Sarah's hands were clasped in front of her, resting on her waist. She looked composed, a statue of maternal expectation. There was a chair pulled out. One of the sturdy, high-backed wooden chairs that had been in the family since Emily was 5. It was positioned in the center of the open space, angled slightly away from the table. Emily stopped in the doorway. The sight of the chair made her stomach flip. It was a tableau from a different lifetime, a scene she thought she had aged out of. "Close the door," Sarah said. Her voice was level, devoid of anger, but rich with command. Emily turned and pushed the kitchen door shut. The click of the latch was final. "Come here," Sarah said. Emily walked forward. She felt absurdly large in the room. At 20, she was taller than her mother, broader in the shoulders. The dynamics of physical power had shifted years ago, yet in this moment, she felt small. She felt like she was shrinking inside her neon green skin. She stopped 3 feet from the chair. "I didn't think you'd actually do this," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought you were bluffing." "I don't bluff about integrity, Emily," Sarah replied. She reached out and touched the back of the chair. "And I don't bluff about consequences. You breached the sanctity of this home. You made a choice to act like a suspicious child. Now you have a choice to make as an adult." Sarah looked her in the eye. "Are you staying? Or are you leaving?" Emily looked at the back door. The car was there. She could run. She could drive away, sleep in her car, eat cheap sandwiches, and be free of this. But the thought of that freedom felt cold. It felt lonely. It felt like the exact isolation she had been trying to break through when she downloaded that tracker. "I'm staying," Emily murmured. "Then you accept the terms," Sarah said. It wasn't a question. Sarah picked up the paddle. She weighed it in her hand, a familiar heft. Then she pointed to the chair. "Bend over. Jeans down, now." The command hung in the air, absolute and sharp. Emily hesitated. Her hands went to her belt loops, her fingers fumbling with the metal button. The denim felt stiff, unyielding. The shame was a hot, prickly heat that started in her chest and flooded her face. This was the part that stripped away the ego. The exposure. Double quotes, mom. Double quotes. Emily started a last-ditch plea. Do not make me count again, Sarah warned, her eyes narrowing slightly. The conversation is over. The action has begun. Emily bit her lip. She undid the button. The zipper hissed a sound of surrender. She pushed the denim down, shuffling it past her hips, past her thighs, until it bunched around her knees. She stood there for a second, exposed in her simple cotton underwear, the cool air of the kitchen hitting her skin. The neon green t-shirt was long, covering her partially, but it wasn't enough to hide the vulnerability. Assume the position, Sarah instructed. Emily stepped forward. She placed her hands on the seat of the chair, gripping the edges until her knuckles turned white. She bent at the waist, extending her torso, lowering her head. Her hair fell forward, a curtain shielding her burning face from the world. She was 20 years old. She was a university student. She was an adult, and she was currently bent over a kitchen chair waiting for her mother to spank her with a wooden paddle because she had stalked her. The absurdity and the gravity of it warred in her mind. Behind her, she heard Sarah move. The sound of wool trousers swishing. The creak of the floorboard. Then silence. The wait was the first punishment. The anticipation. Emily's muscles tensed, her glutes tightening instinctively. She squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the blow. Relax, Sarah ordered from behind her. Tensing will only make it bruise. Emily tried to exhale, tried to force her muscles to unspool. You wanted to know everything, Sarah said, her voice directly behind Emily, calm and terrifyingly close. You wanted to be in my business. You wanted to remove the boundaries. Well, here we are. No boundaries. The first swing came without a specific countdown. Crack, that it wasn't a dull thud. It was a sharp, biting crack that echoed off the tile floors. The paddle connected with the center of Emily's seat, precise and flat. Ah! Emily gasped, her body jerking forward involuntarily. Her fingers dug into the wood of the chair. The pain was immediate, a stinging, burning flare that radiated outward. It was shocking. It had been years, and the memory of the sensation had faded, softened by time. The reality was much sharper. 1, Sarah counted calmly. She didn't rush. That was the worst part. Sarah let the sting settle. She let it bloom. She let Emily process the reality of what was happening. Crack. 2. The second strike landed slightly lower, right at the curve of the buttock. Emily hissed through her teeth, her feet dancing slightly on the linoleum. The tears sprang to her eyes instantly, a physiological reaction to the shock. You tracked me for a week, Sarah said, her voice steady, punctuating the rhythm. You watched a dot on a screen and thought you knew me. Crack. 3. Emily cried out, the sound breaking from her throat. The pain was layering now, building a fire that felt like it was consuming her lower half. You didn't ask, Sarah said. You took. Crack. 4. Emily's hips bucked. She couldn't help it. The paddle was unforgiving. It was a solid wall of wood meeting soft flesh, and the wood was winning. Please, Emily whimpered. She hated herself for begging. She was an adult. She should be able to take this in silence. But the regression was powerful. In this position, she wasn't 20. She was just a daughter who had done wrong. Quiet, Sarah corrected. Take it. Crack. 5. The tears were falling freely now, dripping off the end of her nose and spotting the seat of the chair. The neon green t-shirt was wrecked up, exposing her back, offering no protection. I did this because I love you, Sarah said, and for the first time, Her voice wavered slightly. And because I will not let you become a person who thinks the ends justify the means. Crack. 6. It was a heavy one. A solid, resonant thwack that seemed to vibrate through Emily's entire skeleton. She sobbed, a loud, ugly sound of release. It wasn't just the pain anymore. It was the guilt. It was the relief of finally being caught. The pressure of the last week, the spying, the lying, the fear was being beaten out of her, replaced by this singular consuming fire. "I'm sorry," Emily sobbed into the chair. "I'm sorry, Mom." Sarah paused. The paddle rested in the air. "I know," Sarah said softly. Crack. 7. "I missed you," Emily choked out. "I just missed you." Crack. 8. "I know," Sarah repeated. Her voice thick. Crack. Double quotes 9. The rhythm was hypnotic now. Pain, release, pain, release. Emily's world narrowed down to the chair, her mother's voice, and the fire in her seat. "Last one," Sarah announced. "Stay still." Emily braced herself. She gripped the chair so hard she thought the wood might splinter. She held her breath. Crack. The final blow was firm, final, a period at the end of a sentence. 10. Sarah stepped back. The silence that rushed back into the room was deafening. The only sound was Emily's ragged breathing, the wet, hitching gasps of someone who has cried hard. "Stand up," Sarah said gently. Emily couldn't move for a moment. Her body felt heavy, her backside throbbed with a pulsing heat that felt like a sunburn multiplied by 10. Slowly, shakily, she straightened up. She fumbled with her jeans, pulling them up over the tender skin with trembling hands. She didn't button them. She couldn't yet. She turned around. Her face was wet, blotchy, her eyes red. She looked like a wrecked out Sarah was standing there, the paddle already set back on the table. She wasn't looking at Emily with triumph. She was looking at her with a profound, aching sadness. Sarah didn't hug her immediately. She walked to the sink. She turned on the tap and washed her hands. It was a ritualistic cleansing, washing away the act of discipline, separating the punishment from the mother. Emily stood by the chair, feeling raw. Not just physically, though the fire was intense, but emotionally. She felt scoured out, empty. The secrets were gone. The tracking app was gone. The defiance was gone. Sarah dried her hands on a towel. She turned back to Emily. "Go wash your face," Sarah said quietly. "I'll make tea." It was a dismissal, but it was also an invitation. "Go fix yourself, then come back to me." Emily nodded mutely. She walked out of the kitchen, her movements stiff and careful. 2 hours later, the rain had started again, a soft drizzle that misted the windows. The house was cozy now, the heating humming. Emily sat on the gray sofa in the living room. She was wearing loose sweatpants now, jeans were out of the question, and a thick gray sweater. Her neon green t-shirt was upstairs, folded on her bed. She was wrapped in a wool blanket, her knees pulled up, staring at the steam rising from her mug. She felt floaty. The endorphins from the pain were fading, leaving behind a calm exhaustion. Sarah walked in. She had changed too, into a soft cardigan and leggings. She held her own mug of Earl Grey. She sat down on the other end of the sofa. Not too close, just close enough to be felt. They sat in silence for a long time, sipping their tea. "It really hurts," Emily said finally, breaking the silence. Her voice was raspy. "I know," Sarah said. She looked at the fireplace. "It's supposed to." Emily took a sip of tea. The warmth spread through her chest. "I didn't track you because I wanted to control you," Emily said, revisiting the argument from the morning, but without the heat. "I tracked you because ... I was scared you were dying. Or leaving. You were so quiet, Mom, for 2 years. I thought if I knew where you were, I wouldn't feel so alone." Sarah sighed. She set her mug down on the coaster. She turned her body toward Emily. I wasn't avoiding you, Em, Sarah said softly. I was trying to spare you. Spare me what? The mess, Sarah said. She gestured vaguely to herself. Grief isn't a straight line. It's a spiral. And some days I am so angry at your father for dying that I want to scream. Some days I can't breathe. And I look at you, and you're 20, and you're starting your life, and I didn't want my darkness to bleed onto you. I wanted to be mom, strong, capable. But you're not just mom, Emily said, tears pricking her eyes again. You're Sarah, and Sarah lost her husband. I lost my dad, but you lost your partner. Sarah nodded, her eyes glistening. The Willow Room, it's a support group. For widows. Specifically for widows who feel stuck. Emily looked at her mother. Why didn't you tell me? Because admitting I needed help felt like admitting he was really gone, Sarah whispered. And because I didn't want you to think you weren't enough to comfort me. It wasn't about you. It was about needing people who knew the specific weight of this silence. Emily shifted, wincing slightly as the movement pulled at her sore skin. I thought you were seeing someone. A man. Sarah let out a short, wet laugh. God, no. I can barely handle the cat. The tension broke. A small smile tugged at Emily's lips. I stole your privacy because I was scared, Emily admitted. But you never broke. You just kept going. And I punished you for it. Sarah reached out then. She placed her hand over Emily's hand on the sofa cushion. Her palm was warm. You don't get to fix me, Emily, Sarah said firmly. I know. But, Sarah added, squeezing her hand, you get to sit with me. Even when it's hard. Even when it hurts. Emily didn't respond with words. She just leaned over. She rested her head on her mother's shoulder. It was the first time she had initiated physical contact in 2 years. Sarah didn't freeze. She didn't pull away. She wrapped her arm around Emily's shoulders, the shoulders that had been so defiant and neon, green only hours ago, and pulled her close. She rested her chin on the top of Emily's head. I'm sorry I spanked you, Sarah whispered into Emily's hair. No, Emily murmured, closing her eyes. I think I needed it. I needed to stop. I needed to land. Well, Sarah kissed her head. You've landed. Asterisk that night, Emily sat alone in her room. The desk lamp was on, casting a warm yellow pool of light. The paddle was gone. Sarah had put it back in the hallway closet, hopefully to gather dust for another decade. On the bed lay the neon green t-shirt. Emily had washed it. It smelled of detergent and fresh air. She picked it up. She didn't put it on. Instead, she folded it neatly. She went to her desk and pulled out a piece of lined paper. She uncapped a pen. She wrote, Mom, I wore this shirt because I thought it made me look brave. I'm not lost, I'm exploring, but I wasn't exploring. I was hiding. I was afraid that if I stopped moving, if I stopped checking, I'd realize how sad I actually was. I thought your silence meant you didn't need me. But you were just carrying the heavy stuff so I wouldn't have to lift it. I'm sorry I didn't ask to help carry it. I'm sorry I broke into your life. I'm sorry I thought love meant control. I'm learning now. Love means staying. Even when it's hard. Even when you're broken. Even when you don't ask for help. I love you. She didn't send a text. She didn't post it online. She folded the paper into a small square and tucked it into the pocket of the neon green T-dash shirt. Asterisk the next Thursday. 6:10 p.m. The rain had stopped. The sky over Brighton was a bruised purple, the sun setting behind the pier. Emily walked down the stairs. She wasn't wearing the neon shirt. She was wearing a simple white blouse and a gray cardigan, looking very much like her mother's daughter. Sarah was by the door, putting on her navy coat. She looked tense, anticipating the exit. I'm going out, Sarah said, the habit of vagueness hard to break. I know, Emily said. She walked over to the coat rack and grabbed her own jacket. Sarah paused. What are you doing? I'm coming with you, Emily said. Sarah stiffened. Emily, it's a support group. It's private. I know, Emily said. I'm not coming in. I'm going to drive you. And then I'm going to sit in the car and read a book. And when you're done crying or talking or whatever you do, I'll drive us home, so you don't have to drive with tears in your eyes. Sarah looked at her daughter. She looked at the keys in Emily's hand. She looked at the calmness in Emily's face, a calmness that had been bought at a high price earlier that week. Sarah's shoulders dropped. The steel spine softened. Okay, Sarah whispered. Okay. They drove to Willow Lane in silence, but it was a companionable silence. When they pulled up to the curb, the brass bell above the door of the Willow Room was gleaming under the TREE. Emily put the car in park. Sarah opened the door, then stopped. She reached into her bag and pulled out the neon green t-shirt. She must have taken it from Emily's room. You forgot this, Sarah said, handing it to her. Emily took it. She felt the lump of the paper in the pocket. Sarah had read the note. Sarah didn't say anything about the letter. She just reached over and squeezed Emily's knee. A quick, firm pressure. I'll be an hour, Sarah said. Take your time, Emily replied. Sarah got out and walked to the door. She opened it, the bell chiming softly, a welcoming sound. Before she slipped inside, she looked back at the car. She waved. A small, tentative wave. Emily waved back. As the door closed, Emily unfolded the neon green t-shirt and draped it over the steering wheel. The slogan stared back at her. I'm not lost, I'm exploring. Emily smiled. She picked up her book, leaned back in the seat, and waited. She wasn't tracking anyone. She wasn't hunting. She was just waiting. And for the first time in 2 years, she knew exactly where she belonged.